Hi folks, my name is Dr. Gareth Jowett. I'm a senior lecturer in sport and exercise psychology at Leeds Beckett University in the UK. And I've got to level with you, I'm by no means an expert in isolation, and like many people at the moment, struggling to adjust to the current circumstances and lockdown that we're living in. Now, while I'm not an expert, I do know one or two people who are, and it strikes me that of all the voices that we've heard from in the media over the last couple of weeks, and all the good guidance that has been provided by various parties, one group of people that we maybe haven't heard a lot from are those individuals who have some experience of living in isolation or restricted or confined spaces for an extended period of time. And what I wanted to do is hopefully by recording some conversations with these types of individuals, maybe garner some tips from them in terms of how to best adjust and manage the current situation that we're all living through. In the first of these episodes, I talked to a good and old friend of mine, Reid Morrison, who I've known since we were basically around 1 year old. And Reid is an expert in isolation because, as he'll allude to in the tape, he's worked as a weather forecaster for the Met Office, and that has led him to various scenarios around the world that have required him to live within some quite restricted circumstances at times. And I started by asking Reid to tell us a little bit more about those experiences and the role that he's previously had.
Yes, it's certainly a bit different to what we're experiencing at the moment, but up until last year, worked as a weather forecaster for the Met Office. Still there at the moment, but just based in a different role. So pretty lucky within that job that it took me across the world to some pretty remote locations. So, for example, Ascension Island, which sits just south of the equator in the South Atlantic, Falkland Islands, a couple of trips down to the Antarctic, based at a station called Rothera, which is just on the sort of Antarctic Peninsula, around about 67 degrees south. And then for, I think it's 7 years in total, I carried out offshore duties as well. So basically spending 2 or 3 weeks on a vessel, predominantly in the North Sea, sometimes venturing up to the Norwegian Sea, carrying out forecasting duties for them. So yeah, all slightly different experiences in terms of sort of working remotely and working in sort of isolation, but certainly some pretty useful stuff that I experienced in those places that can transfer to the current slightly ever rapidly changing situation we find ourselves in now, really. Yes, so I think although I've been to Ascension and the Falklands before I've been offshore, I think sort of the offshore work sort of feels a lot more like the current situation we find ourselves in compared to some of the other places. The other places, although they were remote, still had sort of quite high populations of people, so you still got that social interaction that we're not experiencing at the moment. Whereas offshore, although there were small teams of people working there, you tended to find yourself a lot more isolated, with a lot sort of more time to kill, as it were, as the sort of the days went by. Um, Certainly, that sort of presented more challenges to myself than being in a community that was sort of much bigger with more activities to do out and about, with sort of chances to go on a lot more walks and see a lot more scenery. Um, so yeah, from an offshore point of view, and also the other places I've been, to be honest, one of the things that always was quite lucky is that there was always a routine to the day. So breakfast, lunch, dinner would all be served at the same time. Sort of really made it easy to sort of base your day around those things. So certainly now working from home, trying to keep that sort of similar sort of thing going, really. Making sure we're having breakfast at the same time, making sure we're stopping for lunch like you would do normally if you were working for an office or at university, and then also just keeping sort of the dinner time similar as well. Um, so yeah, I think sort of keeping that routine, making sure you sort of still get a bit of fresh air in there. I think that's certainly something that struggled with to a certain extent to begin with, not having that cycle to work or that sort of even walk to the car and walk from the car park to the office in the morning. You literally get up, have your breakfast, and then you're at your desk. So something sort of certainly a learning curve for me is that sort of just getting that bit of fresh air whenever you can, really. Especially at the moment when we've got the chance to get out for those extended sort of one exercise a day, as it were. So from a sort of offshore perspective, it certainly was. Sort of the general time you'd spend offshore was 2 to 3 weeks, but sometimes you'd be told that you were going to be on a job that lasted 10 days, and before you know it, it sort of stretched to 3 weeks. I found it really important to sort of not set an end goal and sort of not have that idea of something will stop when you've been told it will. I think that's sort of pretty important at the moment as well, where obviously we understand we're under the lockdown for 3 weeks at the moment. But I think the general feeling is that will be extended. So try not to sort of set your heart on an end date. I know it's quite hard to do, but it certainly makes you, once you get past that end date, sort of things do go a bit slow and you've already started to expect to do things at that point. So yeah, it's important to do that. I've also found that just having sort of not just a set routine for the day is important, but also try and keep your weeks fairly similar. Um, so it's sort of like offshore. I must admit the food was absolutely terrible, but every Sunday they'd do pizza and chips. So you'd sort of look forward to that Sunday, sort of, and you'd have that sort of keep that 7 day cycle going. So it kept the week sort of almost normal to a certain extent. Otherwise, if you don't have a sort of routine job or you're not able to work from home, you can find the days just sort of merge into one and you lose track of what day it is, to be honest. Offshore, you used to be able to judge it based on the football being on a Saturday or the pizza on a Sunday. So you had that sort of day when you knew something would be on. Whereas now with no sport, it's sort of if you're in a position where you're not finding yourself able to work from home or you've got a lot of time on your hands, trying to keep track of sort of those days are hard. So maybe even just set yourself sort of every Saturday have your favourite meal or make sure you have a Sunday roast on a Sunday, just to keep that sense of a week going as well. Yeah, so I must admit that sort of generally at home I'm rubbish at keeping in contact with people. But sort of the situations where you find yourself isolated, it's actually quite nice to hear that different voice. The places I've been generally struggled for communication, apart from telephone and email, really. The offshore vessel, only in the last year I was there, managed to actually get Wi-Fi, so you started to get through the odd WhatsApp if it was sort of the ship was pointing in the right direction and the wind was blowing in sort of the correct way. So it was very sporadic. Um, but it's actually quite nice sometimes. Just actually, you don't often email family, or I don't. But actually, you're sort of getting things down on not necessarily paper, but on a screen. Sort of makes that just a bit of a difference compared to what you normally do, speaking on phone or speaking on sort of FaceTime and things. So just sort of forget that there's lots of different ways to communicate, and also just sort of remembering that other people's sort of lives are going on as well to a certain extent. I think. So obviously, just being aware of how other people are feeling and how other people are sort of handling the situation and might not necessarily want to chat when you do. I've always found, sort of slightly diverging from the question, that it's really important, like with that in mind, that you also look after yourself and take a bit of alone time for yourself, especially if you're living in a house with other people, whether that be family, children, or even just sort of housemates. Make sure you have that place you can go and just read a book or watch a film and not always be under each other's feet. Sort of even people that consider themselves to be extremely social still need that half an hour or hour away a day, I think, just to keep themselves slightly sane. Sort of laughed at me when I was essentially for starting to read a 800-page book on economics, just as something to sort of teach myself while I was having that bit of time with not much to do, and never quite finished it, to be honest. It's probably more of a doorstop than an actual book these days, but it's still there, probably dig it out in a few weeks if this continues. But yeah, I think just sort of on that note of trying to teach yourself economics, it's sort of in Antarctica, I tried to teach myself how to edit films. Download some software before I went down there with that intention in mind. Helen's my wife, currently trying to learn how to weave. So hopefully I've quite a lot of artwork dotted around the house, no doubt, in 3 months' time. So yeah, just sort of good time to try and pick up that sort of skill or learn something that you've always wanted to do. Noticed loads of different resources online that are opening themselves up to being free as well. So I think I saw the Open University has a lot of online courses that they've made available for nothing during this time, sort of including languages and sort of sciences and more of the art stuff as well. So yeah, take the opportunity, teach yourself something new, teach yourself something that you've not quite had the time to do before because life's been a bit too busy. Yeah, I think so. It's important to remember. I think I certainly learned it from being away for extended amounts of time that it will get hard at points. Um, you will probably go through a point where you're feeling a bit down and don't necessarily want to talk to anyone about it, but things do generally get better. Everyone is expected to have those low points, however strong you think you are. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I've always been lucky that where I've been for sort of extended lengths of time has always been someone that's been supportive and sort of able to talk to when you have those sort of slightly low par days. So yeah, just remember that it's not uncommon and not to necessarily worry too much if it does happen to you. Just find someone that you can sort of talk to and someone that's supportive in sort of that aspect of your life.
So there we have it, folks. Some awesome tips from Reid there in terms of particularly picking up on the aspects of routine being important, both in terms of establishing some sort of daily routine and also the need for a kind of weekly pattern, particularly in times where we're unsure how long this is going to go on for. And that aspect being really something we should consider. Other things as well that you picked up on there that I'd just like to highlight, that opportunity that this might afford some of us if we have time, maybe more time on our hands than we might usually, in regards to maybe picking up and learning new skills or learning about new things and expanding our minds in that way. And then I think maybe most importantly, that almost sense of what the esteemed psychologist Susan David, who has an excellent TED talk out at the moment, calls emotional agility. So that ability to roll with the negative emotions and the acknowledgement of those rather than trying to suppress them, being really important during these difficult times that we are currently living through. I hope that you've enjoyed the video. I hope that you find it useful. I'm hoping to be back as well with another episode soon, so look out for that. And until then, see you soon, folks, and take care of yourselves.